Hi, time has come to stitch those patterns. I've been procrastinating for a few weeks and all weekend, but now I'm getting into it. So, in order to prepare and transfer those patterns to my fabric, I will show over the 3 different patterns there is in your advent calendar. I will show 3 different techniques. The first one we're going to show is how to trace on how to transfer your pattern on dark background. So all of you will have found in your advent calendar a few days ago 3 good quality quilting cotton and 3 pieces of calico. The reason for that is that for each pattern I stitch, almost every single piece of embroidery I do, I will stitch on 2 layers of fabric. Because I like the sturdiness of it, and it allows me to use whatever fabric I want as a background without worrying whether that fabric will pucker or take the weight of the stitching I'm putting on. So I have put a layer of calico and my background fabric on top and put them in a stitching hoop. That's a 6-inch hoop, which all the design in all 3 patterns have been sized for a 6-inch. If you decide to go larger or smaller, just photocopy the pattern, do reduction, whatever you need to do to size them appropriately. But I thought that was a nice size project that made it just a little bit of stitching without being too cumbersome. Also, if you're traveling, that's a nice size to have in your handbag. So I will always make sure that my fabric is drum tight. That is particularly important for heavy stitching, otherwise it will pucker. Half of the time, if your fabric is puckering, that is because your fabric is not tight enough in your hoop. I will also always use a screwdriver to tighten the hoop. That requires to have very good quality hoop. This one is hand painted, is one of the samples of the hand painted hoop I sell, but they are all LBC hoop which are made in the UK. So transferring on dark fabric, we will be using what's called the prick and pounce technique, which is not just used in embroidery, but is used across many medium. Plaster carving, painters used to use it as well. It is a technique that is very good to master. It will require a piece of tracing paper, your pattern. I will use what's called a pricker, but just a needle or a pin would do. It's literally something to pierce. This one is a nice lace pricker that allows me to really hold off on the needle pretty well. But all you need is just a needle. And then in this very dirty bag is a bit of chalk, and I created myself this little applicator, which is just like a doorknob type thing with a bit of felt attached to it. Any type of pigment would work. Obviously I'm trying to work on dark fabric, so the lighter the pigment the better, and chalk is a good medium. This is what's called your pounce. First step is to then trace your pattern on the tracing paper. I'm using a permanent marker, but doesn't have to be, can be anything really. There are lines in this pattern that I know the way I'm going to stitch it already, so I don't want these lines, for example, so I'm going to omit those, but otherwise I'm going to trace everything else. Right, I've got my pattern traced. I also didn't trace the center, because that's going to be in my idea will be to cover this in imitation leather and to stitch over the top, so I don't need that portion of it. Now that I've got my tracing, I take my pricking mat. So in order to prick your pattern, it is easier if you have some sort of a squishy surface underneath. Anything like a beading mat, an actual lace pricking mat. This is one I've cobbled up with a bit of a foam core board and a bit of funky foam stuck on top. But anything that gives you a bit of give is nice. It could be a couple of layers of fabric, anything like that, a cork mat, anything like that. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to make a little hole using my needle every 4 or 5 millimeters or so on the line, on each line. This will allow me to push the pounce through. I make sure that I am making a hole where there are important intersections, so that crossing of lines, so that I know where to stop, where the next one starts. I'm going to do that on every single line. Now that I have finished pricking my entire pattern, I have put a little bit of pounce on top of my tracing. So I put my tracing on top of my fabric where I want it to be. I'm putting a little bit of pounce. This stuff will go everywhere. Making sure I've got it in the right place. And all I'm doing now, it can be a little roll of felt, bit of fabric, whatever you have at hand. I'm going to pick up that pounce and literally push it through the holes, making sure I'm holding the tracing in place. I carefully lift it, and my pattern's been transferred. Now what I need can be either a white gel pen. I don't have one immediately at hand, obviously not prepared well enough. Or in this case, I'm going to use, oh, not this one, I'm going to use a little bit of gouache. So I've always got gouache on my desk because I do other paintings. I'm going to use in this case a little bit of white gouache and a very fine paintbrush. Gouache is a watercolor medium, so it's an opaque watercolor. And a very fine paintbrush. Yeah, it's a 10-0. So just before I do that, I'm going to take this on the side and tap it a little to make it a bit clearer. So I removed a little bit of the excess. And it's literally join the dots. So if you haven't got gouache or a paintbrush, you can use, as I said, you can use a white gel pen, but the traditional technique is to use gouache and a fine paintbrush. Take your time. The advantage of gouache is because it's a water-based medium. If you make a mistake, you can always, with a bit of water, remove it. By definition, I always only put permanent lines on my fabric. That's my preferred choice, so I make sure that I can cover them at a later stage. I never use any of those so-called heat erasable pen because they're actually not erasable. The heat make the ink transparent, but the ink is still in the fabric, which can cause problem at a later stage. I've got personally some of my pieces of work that have been ruined by those pens, so I never use them. Once that's all done, I leave it to dry and then brush off the remaining of the chalk and your pattern will be ready.